The wind howled like a distant cry, carrying with it the bitterness of another harsh winter night in Winter Haven, Maine. Snowflakes swirled under the glow of street lamps, blanketing the small town in a pristine white silence. The faint sound of Christmas carols drifted through the air, muffled by the storm, and the lights adorning the houses seemed to shimmer with a fragile warmth. Yet, in the midst of this seasonal cheer, there was an undercurrent of unease, a quiet reminder that even on the most festive of nights, shadows could linger. Nora Bennett sat in her modest living room, a fire crackling softly in the hearth. The walls were adorned with faded decorations from Christmases long past, each ornament telling a story of love and loss. On the mantel stood a photograph of her late daughter, Lily, a bright-eyed girl with an infectious smile that had been extinguished far too soon. Nora's house was warm, but her heart was weighed down by the cold of solitude. Outside, a figure moved through the storm, small and fragile against the elements. A young girl, her steps hesitant, approached a house at the end of the street. She clutched her thin coat tightly, her breath visible in the freezing air. The house she stopped at belonged to Nora, a woman whose life would soon change forever. The girl raised a trembling fist and knocked, the sound barely audible over the howling wind. And so, with that single knock, a chain of events was set in motion. Events that would challenge beliefs, uncover truths, and redefine what it meant to protect the innocent. This is a story of courage born from heartbreak, of a kindness that defied the darkness, and of how one small act can ripple outward to touch countless lives. As the door opened, the icy wind rushed inside, carrying with it a plea that would pierce the quiet of Nora's lonely home. "Please don't send me back." The first knock came faintly, so soft that Nora Bennett wondered if it was merely her imagination. Outside, the storm had intensified, the snow falling in thick sheets that obscured everything beyond her frosted windows. She wrapped her cardigan more tightly around her shoulders, listening intently. Then it came again. 3 sharp raps that echoed in the quiet of her home. She hesitated. It was unusual for anyone to visit her, especially on Christmas Eve. Winter Haven was a sleepy town, where most people knew to leave an old widow in peace. But something about the knock tugged at her, a faint sense of urgency she couldn't ignore. Rising from her armchair, she shuffled toward the door, her slippered feet making soft scuffing sounds against the wooden floor. She paused, her hand on the doorknob, and peered through the peephole. What she saw made her heart catch in her chest. A young girl stood on the porch, her small frame hunched against the cold. Her coat was thin, barely adequate for the biting wind, and her hair hung in damp, tangled strands. Bruises mottled her pale arms, stark against the dark fabric of her sleeves. But it was the look in the girl's eyes that struck Nora most. A mix of fear, desperation, and something else, a glimmer of hope. Nora opened the door a crack, the icy wind immediately slicing through the warmth of her home. "Can I help you, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice gentle but wary. The girl's lips trembled, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please don't send me back. They'll hurt me." Nora's heart clenched. She opened the door wider, her instincts battling with her caution. "What's your name?" "Ava," the girl replied, her teeth chattering. "Please, I don't have anywhere else to go." For a moment, Nora was frozen, her mind racing. She had spent years in quiet solitude, mourning the loss of her daughter and avoiding entanglements that might disturb her fragile peace. Yet here was a child, battered and broken, standing on her doorstep with nowhere to turn. Could she take this on? Should she? A gust of wind swept through the porch, making Eva shiver violently. That decided it. "Come inside," Nora said firmly, stepping aside to let her in. Eva hesitated for a moment, before shuffling into the house, her boots leaving wet prints on the floor. Nora shut the door quickly, cutting off the icy draft, and turned to face her unexpected visitor. Up close, the girl looked even more fragile, her cheeks flushed from the cold, and her thin frame trembling visibly. "Let's get you warm," Nora said, guiding Eva to the living room. She wrapped a thick blanket around the girl's shoulders and knelt in front of her. "Are you hungry? Thirsty?" Eva nodded faintly. "A little," she admitted. Nora hurried to the kitchen, her mind swirling with questions. Who was this child? Where had she come from? And who were the they she was so afraid of? As she prepared a bowl of soup and a mug of hot cocoa, Nora's thoughts drifted to her daughter, Lily. If Lily were here, what would she do? The memory of Lily's compassionate nature brought a lump to Nora's throat. She carried the tray back to the living room, determined to get some answers. Eva ate cautiously, as if unsure whether the food was truly meant for her. Nora watched her, waiting until the girl's shivers had subsided, before asking gently, "Eva, can you tell me where you came from? What happened to you?" Eva's hands tightened around the mug, her eyes dropping to the floor. "I ran away," she said quietly. "From the trailer park. My stepdad, he—" Her voice broke, and she shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. Nora's heart ached at the sight. She reached out, placing a comforting hand on Eva's knee. "It's okay," she said softly. "You don't have to say anything if you're not ready." The girl looked up, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. But as the night wore on, and the storm continued to rage outside, Nora couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, danger lurked, and it wouldn't be long before it came knocking too. The morning light filtered through the lace curtains in Nora Bennett's living room, casting soft patterns on the wooden floor. Eva sat curled on the couch, still wrapped in the thick blanket Nora had given her the night before. Her small hands clutched a mug of cocoa, now lukewarm, as she stared out the window. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world blanketed in pristine snow. To an outsider, it might have looked like the peaceful aftermath of a serene Christmas Eve. But inside Nora's home, the air was heavy with unspoken questions. Nora sat across from Eva, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She'd barely slept, her mind racing with the implications of the child's sudden arrival. Who had hurt her? Where could she go? What role, if any, should Nora play in her future? Eva's voice broke the silence, soft and hesitant. "Are they going to find me here?" Nora's heart ached at the fear in the girl's voice. She leaned forward, her tone firm but soothing. "Not if I can help it, sweetheart. You're safe here for now." Eva nodded, though her expression remained uncertain. She glanced at the door, her eyes darting to the locks, as if imagining them breaking under force. Nora's mind raced. She knew she couldn't keep Eva hidden forever. It wasn't just a matter of safety. It was a matter of law. But the idea of calling the authorities filled her with unease. What if they sent Eva back to the very people who had hurt her? The smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen mingled with the faint aroma of pine from the Christmas tree. Nora had always found comfort in small rituals, but today, even the familiar act of pouring herself a cup felt heavy with indecision. She stood by the counter, gripping the ceramic mug tightly, as memories of her daughter, Lily, filled her thoughts. She'd lost Lily too soon, in a car accident that had shattered her world. For years, she'd avoided emotional entanglements, choosing instead to live quietly, nursing her grief in solitude. And yet, here was Eva, stirring something deep within her. Could this frightened child be a chance for redemption? Or was she risking more heartbreak by getting involved? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of soft footsteps. Eva had ventured into the kitchen, her blanket trailing behind her. "Miss Bennet," she said quietly, using the formal title that made Nora smile despite herself. "Yes, dear." Eva hesitated, her hands twisting the edge of the blanket. I don't want to be trouble. If you want me to leave, I'll go. I'll figure it out." The words were spoken with such resignation that Nora felt a pang of guilt. She set her mug down and knelt in front of Eva, meeting the girl's wide, tear-filled eyes. "Eva, you're not trouble. You're a child who deserves to be safe and loved. We'll figure this out together, okay?" Eva nodded, though her expression remained wary. Nora knew she couldn't let the girl's fear dictate her actions. She had to make a decision, and she had to make it soon. Over breakfast, Nora gently coaxed Eva into sharing more about her life. The girl spoke haltingly, her voice trembling, as she recounted snippets of her time at Hazel Creek Trailer Park. "My stepdad, Travis, he's not nice," Eva began, staring at her plate. "He makes me go out and ask people for money. If I don't bring back enough, he gets mad." She hesitated, her small fingers gripping the edge of the table. "Sometimes he hits me. And my mom, she doesn't stop him. She says it's my fault for not doing what I'm told." Nora's hands tightened into fists beneath the table. The image of this tiny, fragile girl, enduring such cruelty, filled her with a rage she hadn't felt in years. But she forced herself to stay calm, her voice gentle, as she asked, "Do you know why they want money, Eva?" Eva shook her head. "Travis says it's none of my business. But sometimes I hear him on the phone. He talks about moving stuff and keeping people quiet. I don't know what it means." Nora exchanged a glance with the empty seat beside her, as if Lily's spirit might offer guidance. Whatever Travis was involved in, it was more than simple greed. The thought sent a chill down her spine. As the day wore on, Nora's resolve began to solidify. She couldn't turn Eva away. Doing so would mean abandoning her to a life of pain and fear, a thought Nora couldn't bear. But protecting Eva meant stepping into a world of danger, a world Nora had no experience navigating. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the wintry sky, Nora made a decision. She called her neighbor James Harper, a retired journalist known for his investigative work. If anyone could help her understand the danger they were facing, it was James. James arrived within minutes, his sharp eyes scanning the room before settling on Eva. "You've got yourself in a bit of a situation, haven't you, Nora?" he said, his tone both concerned and curious. Nora nodded. "This is Eva," she said, her hand resting lightly on the girl's shoulder. "She needs our help." James crouched to Eva's level, his voice kind but firm. "Hello, Eva. Can you tell me about the people you're running from?" Eva hesitated, glancing at Nora for reassurance. When Nora nodded encouragingly, Eva took a deep breath and began to speak. She described Travis, his temper, and the fear that ruled her days at Hazel Creek. James listened intently, his expression growing graver with each detail. "This isn't just about her stepdad," James said, when Eva finished. He straightened, his gaze meeting Nora's. "There's something bigger happening here. I'll make some calls, see what I can dig up." Nora felt a flicker of relief. She wasn't alone in this. Together, she and James could find a way to protect Eva. As James left, promising to return with information, Nora sat beside Eva on the couch. The girl's head rested against her shoulder, and for the first time, she seemed to relax. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft and silent, blanketing the world in a fragile peace. Nora tightened her arm around Eva, her mind made up. Whatever the cost, she would keep this child safe. The winter morning crept over the town of Winter Haven, its light subdued by thick clouds that promised another snowfall. Inside her modest kitchen, Nora Bennett sipped her tea, her gaze fixed on the frost-framed window. The warmth of the ceramic mug did little to thaw the chill creeping into her thoughts. Eva was still asleep upstairs, curled under a pile of blankets, the first semblance of peace Nora had seen on the girl's face since she arrived. But Nora wasn't at peace. Memories, sharp and vivid, surfaced like an unwelcome tide. They carried her back to another Christmas Eve years ago, to a small hospital room, dimly lit by a single lamp. Lily, her daughter, had been there, her golden hair splayed across the pillow. The car accident that had stolen Lily from Nora played on a loop in her mind. The smell of antiseptic, the faint beeping of machines, and the unbearable stillness that followed when the machines fell silent. Nora had spent years trying to push those memories away, to focus on the students she had taught or the community events she had organized. Yet now, with Eva upstairs, those memories resurfaced with a vengeance, tethering her grief to the present. She had failed to protect Lily. Could she protect Eva? The creak of floorboards pulled Nora from her thoughts. She turned to see Eva standing in the doorway, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. The bruises on her arms were stark against her pale skin, a visual reminder of the horrors she had endured. "Good morning, sweetheart," Nora said gently, masking her turmoil with a warm smile. "Did you sleep well?" Eva hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor. "Yes, ma'am," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She shuffled to the kitchen table, her small frame swallowed by the oversized chair. Nora poured a glass of milk and placed it in front of her. "Drink up. It'll help warm you." Eva took the glass, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you," she murmured, her gaze avoiding Nora's. Nora sat across from her, studying the girl's face. The silence stretched between them, fragile yet heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Nora leaned forward, her voice soft but steady. "Eva, can you tell me a little about where you came from? About Hazel Creek?" Eva's grip on the glass tightened. Her eyes flickered with fear, and she shook her head. I can't," she stammered. "If they find out I told you—" "They won't," Nora interrupted firmly. "You're safe here. I won't let anyone hurt you." Tears welled up in Eva's eyes, but she bit her lip, swallowing them back. They make us do things. Bad things. If we don't bring back enough money, Travis gets angry. Really angry." Her voice broke, and she looked away, ashamed. Nora's heart clenched. She reached across the table, placing her hand over Eva's. "It's not your fault, Eva. None of this is your fault." The sound of a car engine outside broke the moment. Nora's hand instinctively tightened over Eva's. She rose from her chair and peered out the window. A black sedan idled at the curb, its windows tinted. The engine rumbled for a moment before the car pulled away, disappearing down the snowy street. Nora's chest tightened. She turned back to Eva, who was watching her with wide, frightened eyes. "Was that them?" Eva whispered. Nora forced a reassuring smile. "It's probably just someone passing through. Don't worry." But the unease in her stomach suggested otherwise. That afternoon, Nora stepped outside to clear the snow from her walkway. The bite of the cold wind stung her cheeks, but the repetitive scrape of the shovel was grounding. She was halfway through when James Harper's voice called out from across the street. "I need a hand?" Nora looked up to see her neighbor, bundled in a thick coat and scarf, making his way over. James was in his 70s, his silver hair always neatly combed. A retired journalist, he had a knack for digging up the truth, a trait Nora had often found both endearing and exasperating. "I'm managing," Nora replied, though her tone lacked conviction. James took the shovel from her anyway and began clearing the remaining snow. "You've had a lot on your plate lately," he said casually. "I saw the girl. Is she staying with you?" Nora hesitated. "Just for a little while. She needed a safe place." James paused, leaning on the shovel. "Safe from what?" Nora's lips pressed into a thin line. She glanced toward her house, where she could see Eva's shadow in the upstairs window. "It's complicated," she said finally. "But James, I might need your help." His expression softened, and he nodded. "You know where to find me." That evening, Nora sat by the fireplace with Eva. The girl was sketching in a notebook Nora had given her, the lines shaky but deliberate. Nora watched her, marveling at the quiet resilience beneath Eva's timid exterior. A knock at the door shattered the calm. Nora's stomach dropped as she rose to answer it. James stood on the porch, his face grim. "I made some calls," he said without preamble. "Hazel Creek has a reputation. There are whispers about Travis and others exploiting kids, but no one's willing to come forward." Nora's grip on the door tightened. "Why not?" "Fear," James replied simply. "People who talk have a habit of disappearing." The words sent a chill through Nora. She glanced back at Eva, who was watching them with wide eyes. "What do we do?" James's gaze was steady. "We find proof. Enough to make sure Travis and his ilk can't hide behind threats anymore." Nora nodded, her resolve hardening. She had lost Lily, but she wouldn't lose Eva or any other child if she could help it. Together, they would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As James left, Nora returned to the living room. She sat beside Eva and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "We're going to make this right," she promised. Eva didn't say anything, but she leaned into Nora's embrace, a flicker of trust breaking through her fear. For the first time in years, Nora felt the stirrings of hope, a hope that perhaps, this Christmas, she could rewrite the story of loss into one of redemption. The night was silent, save for the occasional rustling of tree branches swaying in the crisp winter wind. Nora Bennett stood at her kitchen table, sorting through a stack of faded photographs and legal pads scribbled with notes. Beside her, James Harper, her trusted neighbor and retired journalist, was reviewing his own findings. A thick tension lingered in the air, as if the walls themselves were absorbing the gravity of the situation. "I dug deeper," James began, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but his furrowed brow betrayed his unease. "Hazel Creek's trailer park isn't just an isolated case. There are rumors, whispers, really, of something much larger. Networks like this don't operate alone. They thrive in the shadows, relying on silence and fear." Nora's hands trembled as she clutched her teacup, the warmth a stark contrast to the chill that had settled deep in her chest. "So, it's not just about Travis?" she asked softly, her eyes fixed on the table but unfocused. James shook his head grimly. "No, it's not. And that's what makes this so dangerous." The following morning, James's suspicions were confirmed. With a few discreet calls to his old contacts, he unearthed a troubling thread connecting Travis and the Hazel Creek Trailer Park to a network of child exploitation that spanned several states. The network used children like Eva for begging, petty theft, and worse. Each piece of evidence James uncovered painted a darker and more sinister picture. "They're not just abusing these kids," James explained to Nora during one of their late-night planning sessions. "They're treating them like commodities, disposable." Nora felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She placed a hand on the kitchen counter to steady herself. "And the authorities? Why hasn't anyone stopped them?" James hesitated before replying. "Corruption, bureaucracy, lack of evidence. Take your pick. Organizations like this are built on silence, and they have people willing to protect their interests. Meanwhile, Eva was beginning to open up more about her experiences at Hazel Creek. Sitting at the kitchen table with Nora, she nervously picked at a frayed thread on her sweater. Her eyes darted between the older woman and the warm mug of cocoa Nora had placed in front of her. They said, if I ever told anyone. Eva paused, her voice trembling. They'd find me, that no one could stop them. Nora reached across the table and gently placed a hand over Eva's. You're safe here, sweetheart. No one will hurt you again. I promise. Encouraged by Nora's reassurance, Eva began to describe life at the trailer park. She spoke of other children, each with their own stories of neglect and fear. She mentioned names: Tommy, a boy who had vanished after refusing to steal for Travis; Maria, who cried herself to sleep every night; and Jacob, who'd once tried to escape, but was dragged back, bruised and broken. It's not just Travis, Eva whispered. There's someone else. He comes sometimes. A man in a suit. Nora exchanged a troubled glance with James, who had been silently taking notes. A man in a suit? James pressed gently. Can you describe him? Eva nodded hesitantly. He's tall, wears glasses, always carries a briefcase. James scribbled furiously in his notebook. That could be our link to the larger network, he muttered. The next day, Nora's sense of security was shattered. She woke to find her front porch vandalized. The once pristine snow was trampled and stained with graffiti. Mind your business. James arrived minutes after her frantic call, his face pale with worry. This is a warning, he said, inspecting the damage. They know we're digging. Nora felt her knees buckle, but she gripped the porch railing to steady herself. What do we do now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We don't back down, James replied firmly. If they think this will scare us off, they're wrong. Despite her fear, Nora's determination only grew. She spent the next several days compiling every piece of evidence James had gathered. She made copies, hiding them in different locations in case their home was targeted again. She also began discreetly reaching out to trusted members of the community for support, though many were hesitant to get involved. You're a brave woman, Nora, said Emma Carlson, a local social worker who had agreed to help. But this fight, it won't be easy. I'm not looking for easy, Nora replied, her eyes steely with resolve. I'm looking for justice. One evening, as Nora sat by the fireplace, her thoughts drifted back to Lily. She pulled out an old photo album and flipped through its pages, her fingers lingering on a picture of Lily holding a snow globe. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, You always wanted to help others, Lily. I'm trying to do what you would have done. The memory strengthened her resolve. She knew she couldn't let fear dictate her actions. Eva's life, and the lives of countless other children, depended on her courage. As tensions mounted, James uncovered a crucial lead. One of his sources, an old contact from his journalism days, provided a name: Malcolm Hayes. Hayes has been linked to similar operations in other states, James explained to Nora and Emma. If we can connect him to Hazel Creek, we might be able to bring the whole network down. They decided to act quickly, knowing that every moment of hesitation put more children at risk. James contacted Detective Rachel Carter, a dedicated but overworked officer with a reputation for taking on difficult cases. After hearing their story and reviewing the evidence, Rachel agreed to help. This isn't just a case, Rachel said, her tone fierce. It's a fight for these kids' lives, and I'm all in. As the group finalized their plans to gather more evidence against Hayes, Nora returned home to find an envelope taped to her front door. Inside was a single photograph of Eva, taken from a distance. The message scrawled across the back sent a chill down her spine. "We're watching." Nora's hands trembled as she clutched the photo. She felt the walls of her home closing in, the warmth of the fire unable to chase away, the cold dread settling over her. But as fear threatened to consume her, she looked over at Eva, who was quietly coloring at the kitchen table. Taking a deep breath, Nora resolved to press on. For Eva, for the other children, for Lily. The battle was far from over, but Nora knew she wouldn't face it alone. Winter Haven was blanketed in fresh snow. The town's quiet streets, reflecting the soft glow of street lamps. Nora Bennett stood by her window, her breath fogging the glass, as she gazed out into the cold night. Her house, once a solitary refuge, had become a battleground, a place where innocence and cruelty collided. But tonight, it would also become a sanctuary. "Miss Bennett?" Eva's small voice broke through the silence. The girl stood at the doorway to the living room, clutching a worn blanket around her shoulders. Her wide eyes betrayed a mix of fear and curiosity. "Are they going to come for me?" Nora turned, her heart aching, at the sight of Eva's fragile form. "Not if I have anything to say about it," she said, her voice firm but kind. "This is your home now, Eva. You're safe here." The girl hesitated before nodding, her trust growing one small step at a time. Nora's resolve hardened. She couldn't do this alone, but she wouldn't let fear dictate her actions. There were others who could help, and it was time to bring them into the fold. The first person Nora contacted was Emma Carlson, a seasoned social worker who had spent years advocating for children in the foster care system. Emma arrived the next morning, her no-nonsense demeanor softened by the warmth in her eyes. "Nora," Emma greeted, pulling off her gloves and shaking the snow from her coat. "You've done a brave thing here. But it's also dangerous. We need to be smart about this." Nora nodded, offering Emma a cup of coffee. "I'm not looking for easy solutions, Emma. I just want to do what's right for Eva." Emma glanced toward the living room, where Eva was quietly coloring in a notebook. "She's been through so much," Emma said softly. "But she's resilient. Kids like her, they just need a chance." James Harper joined them later that afternoon, bringing a folder filled with new information he'd uncovered. "I've got more names," he said, spreading the papers across the dining table. "Travis isn't working alone. There are others at Hazel Creek who are just as involved, maybe more so." Emma's brow furrowed as she scanned the documents. This isn't just a local problem. This network, it's bigger than we thought. As the adults strategized, Eva found solace in the small routines Nora had created for her. Each morning, they made breakfast together, the simple act of cracking eggs and buttering toast, offering a sense of normalcy. Eva had started calling Nora Miss Bennett, a title that carried both respect and affection. One evening, as they decorated the modest Christmas tree in the living room, Eva hesitated before placing an ornament on a branch. "My mom used to have one like this," she said quietly, holding a small ceramic angel. Nora knelt beside her. "It's beautiful, Eva. Why don't you put it right in the center?" Eva's lips curved into a shy smile as she hung the ornament. For a brief moment, the weight of her past seemed to lift, replaced by the warm glow of the twinkling lights. But peace was fleeting. Late one night, Nora was startled awake by the sound of pounding on her front door. She hurried to the window and peered out, her heart racing. Standing on the porch, his face contorted with rage, was Travis. "I know she's in there," he bellowed, his fists hammering against the door. "You can't keep her from me." Nora's hands shook as she reached for her phone. She dialed James, her voice barely steady. "He's here, James. Travis is here. Stay inside," James instructed. "I'm on my way, and call the police." By the time James and the authorities arrived, Travis had fled, but the encounter left Nora shaken. "He's not going to stop," she said, her voice trembling. "He'll do whatever it takes to get her back." James placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll do whatever it takes to stop him." The next day, James and Emma devised a plan to gather more evidence against Travis. James suggested using a small recording device to capture incriminating conversations. Emma, with her network of contacts, identified potential allies within local law enforcement who might be willing to help. Eva, despite her fear, proved to be a crucial source of information. She described a shed behind Travis's trailer where she'd seen other children forced to sleep. "They called it the box," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If we didn't do what they said, they'd lock us in there." Nora's heart ached as she listened, but her resolve only deepened. "We'll make sure no child ever has to go through that again," she promised. As the days passed, Eva began to open up more, sharing not only her fears, but also her dreams. One evening, as they sat by the fire, she turned to Nora and asked, "Do you think I could go to school one day?" Nora's eyes filled with tears. "Of course you can, sweetheart. You can do anything you set your mind to." Eva's smile was small but genuine. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to hope. But the threat was far from over. One evening, as Nora prepared dinner, she noticed a shadow moving outside her kitchen window. Her pulse quickened as she grabbed the phone. But before she could dial, the power suddenly went out. "Miss Bennett?" Eva called from the living room, her voice tinged with fear. Nora lit a candle, her hands trembling. "It's okay, Eva. Stay where you are." Just then, a brick crashed through the front window, shattering glass across the floor. Nora shielded Eva as the cold winter air rushed into the room. Attached to the brick was a note, scrawled in jagged handwriting. "This isn't over." Nora held Eva close, her heart pounding. But even as fear threatened to consume her, she knew she couldn't give up. Not now. Not ever. The brisk winter morning painted the town of Winter Haven with a gray, solemn hue. Nora Bennett, standing at her kitchen window, stared out at the snow-covered street, her mind heavy with the events of the past days. Despite the warmth of the house, a chill lingered in the air, not from the cold outside, but from the growing danger that seemed to creep closer with every passing moment. Eva sat silently at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing patterns on the edge of a steaming mug of cocoa. The bruises on her arms had faded slightly, but the fear in her eyes remained vivid. Nora could see that fear every time Eva flinched at the sound of a car passing by, or when a shadow moved too quickly across the window. It wasn't just the terror of her stepfather Travis, but the weight of years of mistreatment and control. James Harper arrived shortly after sunrise, his face lined with concern. He carried a brown leather satchel slung over his shoulder, its contents rustling as he set it on the table. "We need to talk," he said gravely, his voice low. He looked at Nora, then at Eva, who shrank slightly under his gaze. "It's okay, sweetheart," Nora said gently, reaching over to place a comforting hand on Eva's shoulder. "James is here to help us." Eva nodded hesitantly, but said nothing. She took her cocoa and moved to the living room, curling up on the sofa, where she could still hear the conversation, but remain out of sight. James leaned closer to Nora, lowering his voice further. "I've uncovered more about Travis and the Hazel Creek trailer park. It's worse than we thought." He pulled out a stack of papers and photographs from his satchel, spreading them across the table. Nora's heart sank as she saw the images, children's faces, their eyes hollow with despair, and the decrepit trailers that housed them. One photograph showed Travis with a group of men, their faces hard and cruel. These men are part of a network, James continued. It's not just Travis. He's working with others to exploit these kids. Eva's just one of many. Nora's hand trembled as she picked up one of the photographs. How do we stop them? James hesitated. I've been recording our conversations with Travis and gathering what evidence I can. But we need more. If we're going to bring this operation down, we have to get someone inside. Nora's eyes widened. Inside? That's too dangerous. We can't risk Eva. Not Eva, James interrupted. Me. Nora stared at him in disbelief. James, you're not a young man anymore. You could get hurt, or worse. I know the risks, he said firmly. But I also know that these kids don't have anyone else fighting for them. I've been doing this kind of work for years. If I can get close enough to gather more evidence, we might have a chance to take them down for good. Before Nora could argue further, a soft voice came from the living room. I know things, Eva said, stepping back into the kitchen. Her small frame seemed even smaller under the weight of her words. I know where they keep the papers, the ones Travis hides. I've seen them. James and Nora exchanged a glance. What kind of papers? James asked gently. Lists, Eva said, her voice barely above a whisper. Of names, places, and numbers. Travis calls them his insurance. He hides them in a box under the floorboards in his trailer. James's eyes lit up with urgency. That's exactly what we need. If we can get our hands on those papers, we'll have everything to expose them. Nora's stomach churned with anxiety. How are we supposed to get into his trailer without being caught? James thought for a moment. We'll need to wait for the right moment. When Travis is away, we can slip in and grab the box. But we'll need someone to watch the area, someone who knows the park. Eva stepped forward, her chin trembling but her eyes resolute. I can help. I know where the men go and when. I can show you. Nora's heart ached at the bravery in Eva's voice. She wanted to shield the girl from further danger, but she knew they couldn't do this without her. That evening, the three of them sat around the kitchen table, formulating a plan. James sketched out a crude map of the trailer park, marking key locations based on Eva's descriptions. The trailer where Travis lived was at the edge of the park, partially obscured by overgrown bushes and a rusted chain-link fence. We'll go at night, James said, when the park is quiet. Eva, you'll stay with Nora and keep an eye on the road from a safe distance. If anything looks suspicious, signal us. Nora nodded, her jaw set with determination. And what about the box? How do we know we can get to it? I'll bring tools to lift the floorboards, James replied. It shouldn't take long, but we have to be quick. The longer we stay, the greater the risk. The night was cold and silent as they approached Hazel Creek. Nora parked her car a few streets away, and they continued on foot, their breaths visible in the icy air. Eva led them through a narrow path that wound behind the park, avoiding the main road where Travis's associates might be lurking. When they reached the edge of the park, James crouched behind a tree, peering through binoculars. The dim light from a single street lamp illuminated the trailer. It appeared empty, but shadows moved in the distance, keeping them on edge. All clear, James whispered. Let's move. Nora stayed back with Eva, their eyes fixed on James as he slipped into the shadows. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours as they waited in tense silence. Eva's hand gripped Nora's tightly, her fingers ice cold despite the gloves Nora had given her. Suddenly, the sound of raised voices shattered the stillness. Nora's heart leapt as she saw two figures approaching the trailer from the far side. "James!" Nora hissed under her breath. James emerged from the trailer, clutching a metal box under his arm. He moved swiftly, but the men had spotted him. Shouts erupted, and one of the men started running toward him. "Run!" Nora shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. James bolted toward them, his breath visible in the cold air. The men were gaining on him, but as he reached Nora and Eva, they ducked into the trees, the darkness swallowing them whole. Back at Nora's house, they opened the box, their hands shaking with anticipation. Inside were stacks of papers, names, addresses, and transactions that painted a damning picture of the trafficking network. "This is it," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is what we need to take them down." Nora looked at Eva, who was curled up on the couch, her eyes wide with exhaustion, but also a glimmer of hope. "You were so brave tonight," Nora said, kneeling beside her. "Because of you, we can stop them." Eva managed a small smile, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just want the other kids to be safe." As they prepared to hand the evidence over to the police, Nora felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, she believed they had a real chance of bringing justice to the children of Hazel Creek. The shadows might have been closing in, but together, they were beginning to find the light. The cold of the Winter Haven night hung heavy in the air, and Nora Bennett tightened her scarf as she stood outside James Harper's modest home. The evening was unnervingly silent, save for the occasional rustling of bare branches in the wind. Eva clutched Nora's hand tightly, her small fingers trembling. Inside the house, James was reviewing the evidence gathered over the last few days. The atmosphere was thick with a sense of urgency. They were running out of time. James leaned over his cluttered desk, his glasses reflecting the glow of his laptop screen. "Nora," he said, motioning her over, "we have enough here to go to the authorities. These recordings prove Travis is involved in something much bigger." Nora stepped closer, her heart racing as she scanned the screen. James had pieced together a chilling puzzle: names of children, coded transactions, and references to Hazel Creek. "We can't wait," Nora whispered. "If we don't act now, who knows what will happen to those kids?" Before James could respond, the faint sound of tires crunching on gravel echoed from outside. Eva's eyes widened in fear. "They're here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. James moved swiftly, shutting off the lights. "Stay back," he instructed, grabbing a baseball bat he kept by the door. Nora ushered Eva into the kitchen, hiding her behind the counter. A loud knock shattered the silence, followed by a menacing voice. "James Harper, we know you're in there. Open the door, or we'll make you regret it." Nora's heart pounded as she clutched Eva close. "We can't let them take her," she murmured. James opened a window in the back room, gesturing for Nora and Eva to climb out. "Go now," he urged. "What about you?" Nora asked, her voice trembling. "I'll buy you time," James said firmly, positioning himself near the front door. Reluctantly, Nora and Eva slipped into the freezing night, their breaths visible in the frosty air. They crouched low, moving through the shadows toward Nora's car parked a block away. Inside the house, James stood his ground as the door burst open. Travis's men stormed in, their heavy boots echoing on the wooden floor. "Where's the girl?" one of them demanded, towering over James. "You'll never find her," James spat, gripping the bat tightly. Meanwhile, Nora and Eva reached the car. Nora fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking. As they climbed in, the sound of a struggle erupted from the house. "James," Nora whispered, her voice filled with guilt. "We have to go," Eva urged, tears streaming down her face. Nora started the engine, and the car sped away into the darkness. By the time they reached the Winter Haven police station, Nora was frantic. She demanded to speak with someone in charge, clutching James's USB drive containing the evidence. Detective Rachel Carter, a no-nonsense officer with a reputation for taking on tough cases, listened intently as Nora explained everything. "We'll send a team to Hazel Creek," Rachel promised. Eva hesitated, but finally spoke up. "There's a boy named Sammy. He's only 6. He's in the big trailer at the back. Please, you have to save him." Rachel knelt down, looking Eva in the eye. "We'll do everything we can, sweetheart. You're very brave for telling us this." Hours later, a convoy of police vehicles approached Hazel Creek. The trailer park was eerily quiet, shrouded in darkness. Detective Carter signaled her team to fan out. They moved cautiously, their flashlights slicing through the night. At the largest trailer, they found Sammy huddled under a pile of blankets, his face streaked with dirt and tears. When the officers entered, he recoiled in fear, but Rachel knelt down, speaking softly. "You're safe now, Sammy. No one will hurt you." As Sammy was carried out, the police uncovered more horrors: neglected children, makeshift cages, and stacks of counterfeit documents. Back at the station, Sammy clung to Rachel, refusing to let go. "Is Eva safe?" he asked. "She's safe," Rachel assured him. While the raid brought some children to safety, it became clear that Travis had escaped. The news hit Nora hard. She sat with Eva at the police station, holding her close. "I thought it would be over," Nora said, her voice heavy with despair. "It's not your fault," Rachel reassured her. "What you've done tonight saved lives. But Travis is a slippery one. We'll catch him." Eva remained silent, her eyes downcast. Despite the victory, a shadow of fear lingered. Travis was still out there, and she knew he wouldn't give up easily. As dawn broke, Nora returned home with Eva. The house, though warm and welcoming, felt different, haunted by the events of the night. Nora made Eva a cup of cocoa, placing it in her trembling hands. "You were so brave," Nora said, brushing a strand of hair from Eva's face. "I just want Sammy to be happy," Eva murmured. Nora's heart swelled with pride. Despite everything, Eva's compassion remained intact. As Eva drifted off to sleep on the couch, clutching her worn teddy bear, Nora made a silent vow. She would see this through, no matter the cost. The morning light in Winter Haven felt both hopeful and haunting. The recent raid on Hazel Creek had saved lives, but its aftermath left the town divided. While some neighbors praised Nora Bennett for her courage, others muttered about the trouble she had brought to their quiet community. Winter Haven's snow-covered streets now seemed colder, burdened by whispers and judgment. Nora stood on her front porch, clutching her steaming mug of tea, as she watched 2 of her neighbors walk by. Their glances were sharp, their voices hushed. "She should have stayed out of it," one said, loud enough for Nora to hear. "This kind of mess doesn't belong in Winter Haven," the other added. The words stung, but Nora straightened her back, determined not to let them see the hurt in her eyes. Closing the door behind her, she returned to Eva, who sat at the kitchen table, drawing on a piece of scrap paper. The little girl had been quiet since the raid, her expression distant. "You okay, sweetheart?" Nora asked, placing a gentle hand on Eva's shoulder. Eva nodded, but her silence spoke volumes. As the hours passed, Nora noticed the weight Eva carried growing heavier. The girl's once timid bravery seemed to have withered under the burden of guilt. "I shouldn't have told them," Eva whispered one evening, staring at her hands. "What do you mean, darling?" Nora asked, kneeling beside her. "They hurt people because of me. James got hurt, Sammy's safe, but I'm scared. Nora wrapped Eva in a warm embrace, holding her close. None of this is your fault, Eva. You're brave for speaking up, and because of you, Sammy and others are safe. That's something to be proud of. Eva buried her face in Nora's sweater, her small shoulders trembling. But Travis is still out there. What if he comes for us? Nora swallowed hard, knowing she couldn't offer absolute reassurance. We'll keep fighting, Eva. Together. Late one night, as Eva slept fitfully on the couch, Nora cleaned up the living room. Beneath a pile of folded blankets, she discovered a small, tattered notebook. She recognized it as Eva's, but hesitated before opening it. Inside were pages filled with childlike drawings and shaky handwriting. Most were simple depictions of life at Hazel Creek. Children huddled together, harsh figures towering over them. But one page caught Nora's eye, a crude map with strange symbols and scrawled words like Hidden Room and Sammy's Place. Nora's heart raced as she realized what she was holding. Eva had documented details of Hazel Creek, including locations that hadn't been uncovered during the raid. This could be the key to finding the children still missing. The next morning, Nora braved the Winter Haven town square, the tattered diary clutched in her hands. The air was crisp, and the snow crunched beneath her boots. She headed straight to the community center, where a meeting was underway. Inside, familiar faces filled the room, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism as Nora entered. Detective Rachel Carter stood at the front, briefing the group on the ongoing investigation. Nora, one neighbor called out, her tone sharp. What are you doing here? Nora stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. I found something that might help. Eva kept a diary. It has details about Hazel Creek we didn't know before. Rachel's eyes widened as Nora handed her the notebook. This could change everything, Rachel said, flipping through the pages. But not everyone shared Rachel's enthusiasm. She's dragging this whole town into danger, another neighbor muttered. Why should we trust what a little girl says? Someone else added. Nora's fists clenched, but before she could respond, Rachel spoke up. Eva's account has already proven reliable. Thanks to her, we saved Sammy and other children. If this diary helps us find more, it's worth the risk. Back home, Eva sat curled up in Nora's armchair, her knees tucked to her chest. She glanced up as Nora entered, her eyes wide with worry. Did they believe you? Eva asked. Detective Carter did, Nora replied, sitting beside her. Some people are scared, but that's because they don't understand. Maybe they're right, Eva murmured. Maybe I'm just causing trouble. Nora took Eva's hands in hers. Eva, you've already done more than most adults ever could. You've been brave when it mattered most. Don't let anyone make you feel small. That evening, Rachel arrived at Nora's house, the diary in hand. You were right, she said, her expression grim. The map in here shows a hidden room in one of the trailers we didn't search. It matches descriptions from other witnesses. Eva overheard the conversation and hesitated before speaking. There's a trapdoor, she said softly, under the rug in the living room. That's where they kept the younger kids. Rachel knelt to meet Eva's gaze. You're helping us more than you know, Eva. This could save lives. Word of Nora's efforts began to spread, and to her surprise, some neighbors began to offer their support. Emma Carlson, the local social worker, stopped by with supplies for Eva. A retired carpenter offered to reinforce Nora's doors and windows, ensuring her home was safe. At the same time, Rachel organized a community meeting, urging residents to come together. This isn't just about Hazel Creek, she said. It's about standing up for what's right. These children need us. The tide began to shift. Slowly, the whispers of judgment were replaced with quiet acts of kindness. Bags of groceries appeared on Nora's porch, and someone anonymously paid her heating bill. Winter Haven, fractured but not broken, started to heal. As Nora tucked Eva into bed that night, she felt a sense of hope she hadn't experienced in years. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she was no longer walking it alone. "Miss Bennet," Eva whispered, her voice barely audible. "Do you think we'll ever stop them all?" Nora smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Eva's face. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we're going to try. Together." Eva nodded, her eyes heavy with sleep. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice trailing off as she drifted into a peaceful slumber. Nora sat by the bedside for a long time, watching over Eva. The diary lay open on the nightstand, a reminder of the fight still ahead. But for now, in the quiet warmth of her home, Nora allowed herself a moment of peace. The sun rose sluggishly over Winter Haven, its pale light barely piercing through the heavy gray clouds. Nora Bennet sat at her kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. Across from her, Detective Rachel Carter spread out a series of photos, reports, and maps from the recent raid on Hazel Creek. The grim evidence confirmed what Nora and her allies feared. Hazel Creek was just the tip of the iceberg. Rachel tapped her pen against a grainy photograph of a decrepit warehouse on the outskirts of town. "This building came up in multiple interviews," she said. "It's connected to an interstate trafficking network that stretches far beyond Winter Haven." Nora's stomach churned. The idea that Eva's suffering was part of something so vast was both horrifying and galvanizing. "How do we stop this?" she asked, her voice steady despite the weight of her question. Rachel sighed, her weariness evident. "We need more evidence, more witnesses, and we need to act fast. These operations move quickly. If they think we're closing in, they'll vanish." The sound of the doorbell interrupted their discussion. Nora rose to answer it, finding James Harper standing on her porch, his breath visible in the cold air. "Nora," James began, holding up a file folder. "I've been digging into Hazel Creek's connections. You won't believe what I've found." Inside, James laid out his findings on the kitchen table. His investigation revealed a network of shell companies and shady contractors tied to the warehouse Rachel had identified. At the center of it all was a name that sent chills down Nora's spine. Martin Greaves, a wealthy businessman with a pristine public image. "We've suspected Greaves for years," Rachel admitted, "but we've never been able to pin anything on him. He's careful, and his money buys silence." James leaned forward, his journalist instincts ignited. "Then we expose him. We gather everything we can and make it impossible for him to hide." Eva entered the room hesitantly, clutching her worn teddy bear. She had overheard snippets of the conversation and wanted to help. "There's a man," Eva said quietly. "He came to the trailer park sometimes. Everyone called him Mr. G. Rachel's eyes widened. "Martin Greaves," she whispered. Eva nodded, her grip on her teddy bear tightening. "He didn't stay long. But when he came, Travis got scared. He told us to be on our best behavior. And there was always a black car with him." Her words were a revelation, but they also brought a heavy silence to the room. Nora reached out, placing a reassuring hand on Eva's shoulder. "You're so brave for telling us this, sweetheart." Rachel's team acted quickly, organizing a surveillance operation at the warehouse. James joined the effort, using his connections to document everything from a safe distance. The tension in Winter Haven grew as rumors of the ongoing investigation spread. On a cold, moonless night, The task force prepared to raid the warehouse. Nora stayed behind, pacing anxiously in her living room. Eva sat on the couch, her eyes glued to the TV, though she wasn't really watching. "They'll be okay," Nora said, more to herself than to Eva. At the warehouse, the raid began with precision. Officers stormed the building, finding evidence of trafficking, ledgers, photographs, and even a hidden room lined with child-sized bunk beds. But the primary targets were gone. "They cleared out," Rachel reported grimly when she returned to Nora's house. "Someone tipped them off." The failed raid brought repercussions. Travis, emboldened by the network's temporary escape, began to act more boldly. One evening, Nora returned home to find a message scrawled in red paint across her front door: "Stay out of it." Eva saw the message before Nora could shield her from it. Her face paled, and she clung to Nora's arm. "What do we do now?" Eva whispered. "We keep going," Nora said firmly. "We don't let them scare us into silence." The vandalism became a turning point. The town of Winter Haven, once divided, began to rally behind Nora and her cause. Church groups organized prayer meetings, local businesses offered donations, and volunteers stepped forward to help protect Nora's home. Emma Carlson, the social worker, spearheaded a fundraiser for the children rescued from Hazel Creek. The event brought the community together in a way Nora hadn't seen in years. "Kindness is contagious," Emma said during her speech, and Nora Bennett has reminded us of the power of standing up for what's right. Amid the chaos, Eva began to find her voice. Encouraged by Nora and Emma, she started helping with small tasks, like organizing donations and writing thank you cards to the community. One afternoon, as Nora and Eva sorted through a pile of winter coats for the rescued children, Eva looked up and said, "Do you think I could help other kids one day? Like you do?" Nora's eyes filled with tears. "You already are, sweetheart." As the year neared its end, the pieces of the puzzle began to come together. Rachel's team uncovered a key informant willing to testify against Martin Greaves, and James's articles drew national attention to the case. Eva's map, combined with the evidence from the warehouse, revealed additional locations where children might be held. A new raid was planned, this time with airtight coordination and secrecy. "This has to be it," Rachel said during a late-night strategy meeting. "If we don't get them now, they'll disappear for good." On New Year's Eve, Nora sat with Eva in the living room, watching the snow fall outside. The house was quiet, the only sound the crackling of the fireplace. "Miss Bennett," Eva said, breaking the silence, "do you think we'll ever stop them all?" Nora looked at Eva, her heart swelling with both pride and sorrow. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I promise you this: we'll never stop trying." As the clock struck midnight, Nora hugged Eva tightly, whispering a silent prayer for the year ahead. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, Nora felt a glimmer of hope that they could make a lasting difference. The frosty air of Winter Haven carried a renewed sense of urgency. It wasn't just the sting of recent failures that drove Nora Bennett and her allies forward, but the small glimmers of hope they clung to. The rescued children, Eva's growing confidence, and the community's unexpected rallying cry. The fight wasn't over, and they knew the next steps would determine everything. In the quiet sanctuary of Nora's living room, a team gathered to discuss their next move. Rachel Carter, her sharp eyes darting between maps and case files, laid out the updated plan. James Harper, with his ever-present notepad, scribbled furiously while nodding along. Emma Carlson brought a sense of calm, her presence reassuring both Nora and Eva. "This has to be different," Rachel began, pointing to a map of Hazel Creek and its surrounding areas. "The last raid gave them time to scatter. This time, we attack simultaneously. 3 locations, 1 coordinated effort. No one escapes. James leaned forward. And how do we keep this under wraps? If word leaks again. It won't, Rachel interrupted. We've trimmed the team to only those we trust implicitly. And we'll move in less than 48 hours. It's our best shot. Nora's voice, though soft, carried weight. And the children? What's the plan for them after the raid? Emma smiled gently. We're setting up temporary shelters in town. With the community's support, we'll have warm beds, food, and counselors ready to help them transition. Eva, sitting quietly beside Nora, hesitated before speaking. What if some of them are too scared to trust you? The room fell silent. Nora placed a hand on Eva's shoulder, her touch steady. Then we'll do what we did for you, sweetheart. We'll show them they're safe now, one small step at a time. As preparations intensified, Eva found herself drawn deeper into the effort. At first, it was small things, helping Emma sort supplies or organizing files for James. But soon, she was contributing in more meaningful ways. One afternoon, while reviewing Eva's map, Rachel noticed something peculiar. Eva, these markings here, she said, pointing to a set of circles on the outskirts of Hazel Creek. They don't match any of the known locations. What are they? Eva hesitated, her fingers tracing the edges of the map. It's where Travis used to hide when he thought someone was watching. He called them safe spots. Rachel's eyes lit up. This could be crucial. These spots might hold evidence or even other children. For the first time, Eva felt a sense of pride. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was helping to bring justice. Winter Haven's transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Neighbors who once criticized Nora for bringing trouble to their quiet town were now delivering meals, donating clothes, and volunteering their time. The local church hosted a candlelight vigil, drawing nearly the entire town to pray for the success of the upcoming operation. During the vigil, Pastor Williams addressed the crowd. This isn't just about Hazel Creek, he said. It's about our town, our values, and our duty to protect the most vulnerable among us. Nora stood in the back, her heart swelling with gratitude. When she caught sight of Eva lighting a candle alongside the other children, she felt a profound sense of hope. The night of the operation arrived. Nora, unable to sit idly by, stayed at the temporary shelter with Emma, ready to comfort the children as they arrived. Eva stayed close to her, nervous but resolute. Meanwhile, Rachel's team moved swiftly and silently. They hit 3 locations simultaneously: a secluded cabin deep in the woods, a dilapidated farmhouse on the outskirts of town, and one of the hidden safe spots Eva had marked on her map. At the farmhouse, officers found ledgers detailing transactions and movements within the trafficking network. In the cabin, they rescued 4 children, huddled together in a small, dark room. At the safe spot, they uncovered a cache of documents that tied Martin Greaves directly to the operation. Back at the shelter, the mood shifted suddenly. The sound of a vehicle screeching to a halt outside brought everyone to their feet. Nora rushed to the window, her heart pounding, as she saw a black SUV idling near the curb. Stay here, Nora instructed Eva, her voice firm but calm. Emma joined Nora at the door. Do you think it's Travis? I don't know, Nora admitted, her hand tightening on the doorknob. Before they could react, the SUV sped off, its tires kicking up snow. The message was clear. Someone was watching. Despite the close call, the operation was a resounding success. Rachel returned to the shelter with updates, her expression a mix of exhaustion and triumph. We got them, she said. Not all of them, but enough to shut this network down. And with the evidence we found, Greaves won't be able to worm his way out this time. Eva, standing nearby, allowed herself a small smile. For the first time, she felt the weight of fear beginning to lift. That evening, the shelter buzzed with activity as the rescued children arrived. Eva took it upon herself to greet them, offering small gestures of comfort. A warm blanket, a shy smile, or a whispered, "You're safe now." As the chaos subsided, Nora found a moment to herself. She sat by the fireplace, watching the flames dance as memories of Lily filled her mind. "Lily," she whispered, clutching the ceramic angel Eva had given her during their first Christmas together. "I hope you're proud of what we've done." Eva approached quietly, sitting beside Nora. "Miss Bennet," she said, her voice soft, "do you think they'll ever stop hurting kids like us?" Nora wrapped an arm around Eva, pulling her close. "I don't know, sweetheart, but as long as there are people willing to fight, there's always hope." Together, they watched the fire burn, its warmth a reminder that even in the darkest times, light could prevail. The air was heavy with anticipation as the final pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Nora Bennet sat by her kitchen window, watching the first streaks of dawn cut through the cold Winter Haven sky. The past weeks had pushed her to limits she didn't know existed, yet here she was, steady in her resolve. Across town, Rachel Carter and her task force prepared for the raid that would define their fight. Hazel Creek Trailer Park wasn't just another target. It was the beating heart of a cruel operation that spanned miles and ruined lives. Today, they were going to end it. The tactical team gathered in the back room of the Winter Haven police station, a flurry of movement and quiet discussions. Maps of the trailer park were pinned to the walls, marked with red circles, indicating suspected hideouts, escape routes, and high-value targets. Rachel stood at the center, her voice clear and unwavering. "We have one chance to do this right. Every second counts, and every move matters. Remember, the children's safety is our priority." James Harper, standing at the back of the room, adjusted his glasses and raised his hand. "I've compiled a list of the trailers where the kids are most likely being kept, based on Eva's map and the evidence we've gathered. If we hit these first, we can minimize the risk of them being moved or harmed." Rachel nodded, her sharp gaze softening for a moment. "Good work, James. Let's make sure this ends tonight." Back at the shelter, Eva helped Emma Carlson pack emergency kits for the children they hoped to rescue. Her hands moved with purpose, though her face betrayed a mix of nerves and determination. Nora entered the room, her presence grounding Eva. "You've done more than enough, sweetheart. You've been so brave." Eva hesitated, holding up a small teddy bear she'd found among the donations. "I want to give this to one of the kids. Maybe it'll help them feel safe, like you did for me." Nora smiled, tears brimming in her eyes. "That's a beautiful idea, Eva." As night fell, the task force moved into position. The moon cast an eerie glow over Hazel Creek, its light reflecting off the snow-covered ground. Officers in dark uniforms crept through the shadows, their radios crackling softly with updates. Rachel signaled to her team, her voice a whisper through the comms. "Position secured. Stand by for my signal." The tension was palpable as they waited for the green light. Inside one of the trailers, the sound of children's muffled cries broke the silence, a haunting reminder of why they were there. Finally, Rachel's voice cut through the stillness. "Go." The first trailer door was breached with a deafening crash. Officers stormed inside, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. Two children huddled in a corner, their eyes wide with fear. "It's okay," one officer said gently, kneeling to their level. "We're here to help you." In another trailer, Travis himself was caught off guard, his face twisting into a mask of fury. "You have no right," he bellowed, lunging at the nearest officer. Rachel stepped forward, her gun drawn but steady. "Travis Miller, you're under arrest for child exploitation, human trafficking, and a list of charges longer than you can imagine. It's over." Travis sneered, his eyes darting toward the back door. But before he could make a move, James appeared, blocking his path. "You're not going anywhere," James said, his voice firm. Meanwhile, Eva and Nora waited anxiously at the shelter, their ears glued to the police scanner. When news broke that some children were still unaccounted for, Eva's expression hardened. "I know where they might be," she said suddenly, standing up. Nora's heart skipped a beat. "Eva, no. It's too dangerous." "I have to," Eva insisted, her voice trembling but resolute. "I can't let them stay there another night." Reluctantly, Nora called Rachel, relaying Eva's information. Within minutes, officers moved to a hidden cellar beneath one of the trailers, uncovering a group of younger children who had been locked away. When the last child was carried out, Eva clung to Nora, tears streaming down her face. "They're safe now," she whispered. The raid concluded with 15 arrests, including Travis and several key players in the trafficking ring. Evidence recovered from the site linked the operation to a broader network, ensuring that the fight wouldn't stop here. As the rescued children were brought to the shelter, Nora and Emma worked tirelessly to comfort them. Each tear wiped away, each blanket wrapped around a small, trembling body, was a reminder of why they had fought so hard. The next morning, Winter Haven woke to headlines celebrating the raid's success. Local businesses offered support, and families opened their doors to the rescued children. At the center of it all was Nora, who became a quiet symbol of resilience and hope. During a town meeting, Pastor Williams spoke to the gathered crowd. "What happened last night was more than a victory. It was proof that when we come together, we can overcome even the darkest of evils." The room erupted in applause, but Nora remained humble, her thoughts focused on the children still healing from their trauma. That evening, as the shelter quieted down, Nora found Eva sitting by the fireplace. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" Nora asked, sitting beside her. Eva looked up, her eyes filled with a quiet determination. "I want to help kids like me when I grow up. I want to be like you." Nora pulled Eva close, her voice soft but full of conviction. "You already are, my dear, and I have no doubt you'll change the world." The cold wind of Winter Haven seemed softer as the first rays of sunlight kissed the snow-covered town. The storm had passed, but the echoes of its chaos lingered. Hazel Creek Trailer Park was silent, its grim secrets now exposed to the world. Yet amidst the ruin, a new chapter was beginning, one of healing, hope, and rebuilding. Nora Bennett stood at the shelter's door, her eyes following a group of children playing in the snow. Their laughter filled the air, fragile yet vibrant, like a delicate melody trying to rise above the weight of silence. Eva was among them, her cheeks flushed with the cold, as she helped a younger boy build a lopsided snowman. "Isn't that something?" Emma Carlson's voice pulled Nora's attention. The social worker stood beside her, arms folded against the chill. "A week ago, those kids were terrified of their own shadows. Look at them now." Nora nodded, her heart swelling with quiet pride. "It's amazing what a little safety and love can do." Inside the shelter, Eva sat with Nora by the crackling fireplace. She clutched the same teddy bear she had brought for the children. It was worn but comforting, a piece of her past that she had transformed into a token of resilience. "I'm scared, Miss Bennett," Eva admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if I never feel normal again?" Nora reached for her hand, her touch gentle but firm. "Eva, there's no such thing as normal after what you've been through. But there's a new kind of normal waiting for you. One where you can feel safe, loved, and free to be yourself." Eva nodded slowly, tears brimming in her eyes. For the first time, she felt the stirrings of hope, not just for others, but for herself. Later that week, Nora received a call from a family willing to foster Eva. The Thompsons, a kind-hearted couple with no children of their own, had heard Eva's story and felt compelled to help. Meeting them was a cautious process. Eva clung to Nora's hand as they entered the Thompsons' home, her eyes darting around the cozy living room, adorned with framed photos and warm blankets. Mrs. Thompson knelt to Eva's level, her voice soft. "Hi, sweetheart. We're so glad to meet you. We want you to feel safe here." Eva's gaze flickered to Nora, seeking reassurance. Nora smiled, squeezing her hand. "It's okay, Eva. They're good people. You'll see." Though hesitant, Eva eventually let go of Nora's hand to explore the house, her steps cautious but curious. By the time they left, she had agreed to give it a try, her small smile a glimmer of trust in a world she was learning to navigate anew. Nora's quiet reflection one evening sparked an idea, a foundation dedicated to supporting children like Eva. Sitting at her small desk, she scribbled down her thoughts, envisioning a safe haven that could provide not just shelter, but also emotional and legal support. The Winter Haven Hope Foundation was born. With James Harper's connections and Emma's expertise, Nora began gathering resources and support. The town, inspired by the recent rescue, rallied behind her cause. At the foundation's launch event, Nora stood before a modest crowd in the town hall. Her voice trembled with emotion as she spoke. "Change doesn't happen all at once," she said. "It starts with one small act, one open door. Together, we can ensure that no child feels forgotten or unloved." The applause was thunderous, but Nora's heart remained humble. This was about the children, not recognition. Weeks later, Nora returned to Hazel Creek, now abandoned and quiet. The trailers stood as hollow reminders of the suffering they had once concealed. With Emma by her side, Nora walked through the park, her steps heavy with memories. In one trailer, she found a small, forgotten toy car covered in dust. She picked it up, her fingers brushing against its chipped surface. "This is why we do this," Nora murmured. "For every child who held on to hope, even when it felt impossible." Emma placed a hand on her shoulder. "And because of you, they don't have to hope alone anymore." As news of the rescue spread, so did the story of Winter Haven's courage. Journalists, advocates, and policymakers began to take notice. The ripple effects reached beyond Winter Haven, sparking conversations about systemic reform in child protection. Eva, now more confident, began sharing her story publicly. At a local community event, she stood on a small stage, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I thought I'd never feel safe again," she began, her eyes scanning the crowd. "But Miss Bennett showed me that, even when the world feels dark, there's always someone willing to fight for you." Her words resonated deeply, inspiring others to take action in their own communities. On a quiet evening, Eva returned to Nora's home for dinner. She brought a gift, a small ceramic angel she had painted herself. "It's for you," Eva said, placing it on Nora's mantel, "to remind you of Lily and of everything you've done for me." Nora's hands trembled as she held the angel. Tears filled her eyes, but her heart was light. "Thank you, Eva. This means more than you'll ever know." The two shared a quiet, meaningful moment by the fire, the angel glowing softly in the warm light. As Winter Haven settled into a new sense of normalcy, Nora reflected on the journey they had all taken. Her small house was no longer a place of solitude, but a beacon of hope. Eva's future looked bright, and the Winter Haven Hope Foundation was growing steadily, its impact reaching far beyond their small town. But for Nora, the most profound change was within herself. She had rediscovered her purpose, proving that even in the darkest moments, kindness could light the way. The events at Hazel Creek and the quiet heroism of Nora Bennett rippled far beyond the borders of Winter Haven. What had begun as an act of compassion on a cold Christmas Eve had sparked a movement, one that reached journalists, lawmakers, and families across the nation. Winter Haven became a symbol of what could be accomplished when a community rallied together for justice. Nora Bennett, reluctant to step into the spotlight, found herself at the heart of a story that gripped the nation. A week after the Winter Haven Hope Foundation's launch, Nora received a call from Catherine Myers, a renowned journalist for a major network. "Miss Bennett, your story has captured the hearts of so many," Catherine said warmly. "I'd like to feature you and Eva in a special segment about grassroots efforts making a difference." Nora hesitated. She had never sought recognition. Her focus had always been on the children. But James Harper, standing nearby, gave her an encouraging nod. "This isn't about you, Nora," he said gently. "It's about the message. If sharing your story helps even one more child, isn't it worth it?" Reluctantly, Nora agreed. Catherine Myers arrived with a small crew, setting up cameras in Nora's cozy living room. The space was as it had always been, modest, warm, and filled with traces of the past. Eva sat beside Nora, clutching her painted ceramic angel. Despite her nerves, she agreed to share her story. "What was it like when you first met Miss Bennett?" Catherine asked. Eva glanced at Nora, her voice trembling but steady. "It felt like stepping out of the dark and into the light. She didn't just give me a place to stay. She gave me hope." Nora reached for Eva's hand, her voice soft. "Eva gave me hope too. She reminded me that even the smallest acts of kindness can change everything." The interview aired nationwide, drawing widespread attention. Viewers were moved by Eva's resilience and Nora's quiet strength. Donations poured into the Winter Haven Hope Foundation, and letters of support flooded Nora's mailbox. The media coverage caught the attention of lawmakers. Senator Angela Morales, known for her advocacy work, visited Winter Haven to meet Nora and discuss ways to combat child exploitation. During a town hall meeting, Senator Morales spoke passionately. "The courage shown by this community is extraordinary, but courage alone isn't enough. We need systemic change. Together, we can ensure no child is left in the shadows." The senator proposed the Child Safety and Support Act, which aimed to increase funding for child protection agencies and establish stricter penalties for abusers. Nora was invited to testify before Congress, sharing her first-hand experiences to highlight the urgency of the issue. Standing in the grand chamber, Nora felt the weight of her words. "I'm not a politician or a lawyer," she said, her voice steady. "I'm just a woman who opened her door. But I've seen what happens when we turn a blind eye to the vulnerable. We have to do better. For Eva, for all the children still waiting for someone to care." As Winter Haven transformed into a hub for change, Eva began to find her voice. Now, a teenager, she spoke at schools and community events, sharing her journey and encouraging others to take action. At one event, she addressed a group of high school students. "When you see someone in need, don't look away. You might be the only light in their darkest moment." Her words resonated deeply, inspiring students to start volunteer groups and raise funds for the foundation. Eva's courage became a rallying cry for young people who wanted to make a difference. With the influx of donations and volunteers, The Winter Haven Hope Foundation grew rapidly. It expanded its reach, partnering with organizations in neighboring states to provide resources and support. Nora and her team developed programs focused on healing, education, and empowerment. They launched workshops for teachers to recognize signs of abuse, created mentorship programs for at-risk youth, and established emergency shelters in underserved areas. Emma Carlson, now the Foundation's Director of Social Services, marveled at the progress. "We're not just saving lives," she said during a staff meeting. "We're giving these kids a chance to thrive." James Harper, inspired by his role in uncovering the horrors at Hazel Creek, decided to write a book about the experience. Titled A Door Opened, The Story of Winter Haven, it chronicled Nora's journey, Eva's resilience, and the community's transformation. The book became a bestseller, with proceeds donated to the foundation. At a signing event, James reflected on his journey. "I've spent my life chasing stories," he said, "but this one changed me. It reminded me that the best stories are the ones that leave the world a little better than they found it." The Winter Haven story ignited a national conversation. Communities across the country began to organize similar efforts, inspired by Nora's example. From small towns to big cities, people united to combat child exploitation and support survivors. Nora, ever humble, deflected praise. "It's not about me," she said during an interview. "It's about what we can accomplish together. Change starts with all of us." One evening, Eva surprised Nora with a special gift, a scrapbook filled with photos and letters from children helped by the foundation. "Look at what you've done, Miss Bennett," Eva said, her eyes shining. "Because of you, so many lives have changed." Nora flipped through the pages, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. "Because of us, Eva. None of this would have been possible without you." The festive streets of Winter Haven were alive with cheer, their charm heightened by the warm glow of Christmas lights strung across rooftops and trees. The annual Winter Haven Christmas Gala was in full swing, a celebration of hope and resilience hosted by the Winter Haven Hope Foundation. At the heart of it all stood Nora Bennett, now a familiar figure of strength and compassion in her community. Despite her natural tendency to avoid the limelight, this year was different. Tonight, she awaited a special guest who would bring both closure and a new sense of purpose to her journey. The day began quietly for Nora, with snow gently falling outside her small home. She busied herself in the kitchen, baking cookies to bring to the gala. Her hands moved with practiced ease, but her thoughts wandered to the past, a bittersweet mixture of memories of her daughter Lily and the incredible journey she had shared with Eva. The mantel above the fireplace was adorned with simple decorations, pine cones, holly, and two ceramic angels, one old and weathered, the other new and carefully painted. The sight of them brought a soft smile to Nora's face. As evening fell, a knock echoed through the house. Nora opened the door to find Eva standing there, her arms wrapped around a brightly wrapped package. "Eva!" Nora exclaimed, pulling her into a warm embrace. Now, a poised young woman, Eva radiated confidence and warmth. Her bright eyes sparkled with a joy that Nora hadn't seen in years past. "Merry Christmas, Miss Bennett," Eva said, her voice filled with affection. "I couldn't let this day go by without seeing you." Inside, the two sat by the fire, sipping hot cocoa and exchanging updates on their lives. Eva placed the package on Nora's lap, urging her to open it. Nora carefully unwrapped the gift to reveal a ceramic angel, almost identical to the one that had belonged to Lily. Its delicate wings gleamed under the flickering firelight. "I had it made for you," Eva explained. I wanted you to have something that symbolized how much you've done for me, for all of us." Tears filled Nora's eyes as she clutched the angel. "It's beautiful, Eva." "Thank you." Eva reached for Nora's hand. "No, thank you. You didn't just save me. You taught me what it means to believe in myself. Everything I've accomplished, everything I will accomplish, is because you opened that door." The gala hall was filled with laughter, music, and the hum of lively conversations. Families and children who had been helped by the foundation mingled with donors, volunteers, and community leaders. As Nora and Eva entered, the room quieted and applause broke out. Nora blushed, uncomfortable with the attention, but Eva squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Tonight, they're celebrating what you've built," Eva whispered. "Let them." The evening's program included speeches, performances by local children, and a video montage highlighting the foundation's achievements. Toward the end of the night, Eva took the stage, her presence commanding yet approachable. The room fell silent as she began to speak. "Good evening, everyone. Tonight is more than a celebration. It's a testament to the power of kindness, courage, and community. It's a reminder that one small act can ripple outward, changing lives in ways we can't even imagine." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. "Years ago, on a cold Christmas Eve, I stood outside a door, scared and alone. I knocked, not knowing if anyone would answer. But Miss Bennett did. She didn't just let me in. She gave me a chance to rebuild my life." Eva's voice trembled with emotion. "Today I stand here not just as someone who was helped, but as someone determined to pay it forward. The Winter Haven Hope Foundation is proof of what we can achieve when we come together." She ended her speech with a promise. "For every child still waiting for a door to open, we will be there, because no one deserves to be forgotten." The audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause, moved by Eva's words and the journey she represented. Later that evening, Nora and Eva stepped outside to watch the snow fall, their breath visible in the cold air. The quiet of the night was a stark contrast to the lively celebration inside. "You've come so far, Eva," Nora said softly. "I'm so proud of you." Eva leaned against her, resting her head on Nora's shoulder. "I couldn't have done it without you. You were my first safe place, my first real family." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in a comfortable silence. As the night drew to a close, Eva shared a surprising revelation. "I've been thinking about going into social work," she said. "I want to help other kids like me find their way." Nora's eyes sparkled with pride. "You'd be wonderful at it, Eva. You've already shown so much strength and compassion." Eva smiled. "It's because of you, Miss Bennett. You showed me what it means to make a difference." Back inside, Nora placed the new ceramic angel on the mantel beside Lily's. The two figures stood side by side, a poignant symbol of healing and hope. As she turned off the lights and prepared for bed, Nora whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. For Eva, for the community that had rallied around them, and for the chance to witness the power of love and resilience. The town of Winter Haven buzzed with anticipation. Flyers adorned every lamppost, and the community center had been transformed with strings of twinkling lights and banners that read, "Celebrating Eva Monroe, a journey of hope." This was no ordinary celebration. It was a milestone event to honor Eva Monroe's graduation from university, where she had earned her degree in social work. For the residents of Winter Haven, Eva represented the embodiment of resilience, a shining beacon of what courage and kindness could achieve. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Nora Bennett's cozy home, casting a golden glow over the living room. Nora stood by the mantel, straightening the ceramic angels as if preparing them for the day's significance. Beside her sat a carefully wrapped box, her graduation gift to Eva. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Nora opened it to find James Harper, the retired journalist who had been an integral part of their fight against the horrors of Hazel Creek. Though his hair was grayer now, his energy was as vibrant as ever. "Ready for the big day?" he asked with a grin. Nora smiled warmly. "I don't think I've ever been more ready for anything." Together, they made their way to the university auditorium, where the graduation ceremony was held. The space was filled with proud families and hopeful graduates. When Eva's name was called, the applause was deafening, with Nora's cheers rising above them all. Eva walked across the stage, her cap and gown, a perfect fit for the confident young woman she had become. As she accepted her diploma, she glanced toward the audience, locking eyes with Nora. In that moment, an unspoken connection passed between them, a shared acknowledgement of how far they had come together. That evening, the community center brimmed with life. Tables were adorned with fresh flowers, and the air was filled with the aroma of homemade dishes contributed by the townspeople. The celebration wasn't just for Eva. It was a tribute to the Winter Haven Hope Foundation and the ripple effect of Nora's decision to open her door that fateful Christmas Eve. Eva stood near the entrance, greeting guests with hugs and smile. Her foster parents, the Smiths, were by her side, beaming with pride. As the evening progressed, Eva took the stage to address the crowd. "Good evening, everyone," Eva began, her voice steady and warm. "Tonight isn't just about me. It's about all of us. It's about the power of one small act of kindness to change a life." She paused, scanning the room filled with familiar faces. "When I first came to Winter Haven, I was lost. I didn't believe I deserved kindness, let alone love. But Miss Bennett saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. She gave me a chance, and that chance has made all the difference." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "I stand here today as proof that the darkest nights can give way to the brightest mornings, and I promise to dedicate my life to helping others find their light." The audience erupted into applause, many dabbing at tears, as Eva stepped down from the stage. She made her way to Nora, who pulled her into a tight embrace. "You've made me so proud, Eva," Nora whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Eva smiled through her own tears. "I couldn't have done it without you." The evening held one final surprise. The mayor of Winter Haven took the stage, clearing his throat to quiet the crowd. "Tonight, we honor not just Eva Monroe, but also the woman who started it all. Miss Nora Bennett, your unwavering kindness and courage have inspired us all. It is my privilege to announce that the new community wing of the Winter Haven Hope Foundation will be named the Bennett Center for Hope." Gasps of delight and applause filled the room as Nora was ushered to the stage. Overwhelmed, she waved to the crowd, her heart full of gratitude. "I don't know what to say," Nora began, her voice trembling. "This foundation has always been about the children, about giving them the love and support they deserve. I'm honored, but the real heroes are Eva and the countless others who fight for a brighter future." As the celebration wound down, Eva approached Nora with a small box in her hands. "I have something for you," she said, her eyes shining. Inside the box was a gold locket, engraved with the words, "You opened the door to hope." Inside, one side held a photo of Lily, and the other, a photo of Eva. Nora's hands trembled as she held the locket. "Eva, this is beautiful. I'll treasure it always." Eva clasped Nora's hands in her own. "It's a reminder that no matter how small an act may seem, it can change the course of someone's life." The following day, Winter Haven was abuzz with the story of the celebration. The success of the Winter Haven Hope Foundation had become a source of pride for the town, sparking conversations about how every community could come together to support vulnerable children. Ava, now a rising star in social work, began planning her next steps. She had dreams of expanding the foundation's reach, ensuring that no child would ever feel forgotten or unloved. Nora, meanwhile, found herself busier than ever, mentoring young volunteers and sharing her story at events. She carried the locket close to her heart, a constant reminder of the legacy she and Eva had built together. One quiet evening, Nora sat by the fire, the ceramic angels glinting in the flickering light. She carefully placed Eva's gifted locket around her neck, then added another decoration to the mantel, a framed photo of the two of them from the gala. As she gazed at the photos, the angels, and the locket, Nora felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The house was no longer just a place of memories, but a living testament to the power of kindness and love. The winter sun hung low over Winter Haven, casting a golden glow on the snow-blanketed streets. Inside the newly built Bennett Center for Hope, laughter echoed through the halls. The air was filled with warmth and possibility, a stark contrast to the chilling circumstances that had brought many of the children here. Eva Monroe, now in her late 20s, stood at the entrance of the main hall, a clipboard in hand. Her confident stride and radiant smile reflected the transformation she had undergone. She was no longer the frightened girl who had knocked on Nora Bennett's door that fateful Christmas Eve. She was now a leader, a symbol of hope, and the director of a nationwide movement to protect vulnerable children. Under Eva's leadership, the Winter Haven Hope Foundation had grown into a beacon of change. It operated shelters, counseling services, and educational programs across the country. Each facility bore the same ethos that Nora had instilled: compassion, safety, and empowerment. The Bennett Center for Hope, its flagship location, was the heart of these efforts. Here, children found not only shelter, but also a nurturing environment where they could rediscover their worth. Volunteers and staff, many of whom were once beneficiaries of the Foundation's programs, worked tirelessly to pay forward the kindness they had received. Eva walked into the center's library, where a group of children gathered for a storytelling session. She paused at the door, watching as a young boy read aloud from a book, his voice strong and clear. It was moments like this that reminded her why she had dedicated her life to this mission. Meanwhile, Nora Bennett sat in her favorite chair by the fire, a steaming cup of tea in her hands. Her living room remained a blend of old and new. Photos of Lily and Eva shared space on the mantel, alongside the ceramic angel and the locket Eva had gifted her. As she gazed at the flickering flames, Nora reflected on how her decision to open the door that Christmas Eve had changed not only Eva's life, but her own as well. The once quiet house was now filled with purpose. Volunteers often visited, seeking her wisdom, and letters from families who had benefited from the foundation arrived almost daily. Despite her advancing age, Nora remained an active participant in the foundation's work. She was a mentor to many, her quiet strength and unwavering kindness serving as a guiding light. The climax of the chapter took place at an international child advocacy conference, where Eva was the keynote speaker. The event, held in New York City, brought together leaders, activists, and policymakers from around the world. The venue was grand, with towering glass windows offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. Eva stood backstage, clutching the pink bow she had kept since her time at Hazel Creek. It was a reminder of where she had come from and the countless children who still needed help. When her name was announced, the audience erupted in applause, Ava stepped onto the stage, her heart pounding but her resolve steady. She began her speech with a story, her own. 10 years ago, I was a child without hope, standing on a stranger's porch on a snowy Christmas Eve, she said, her voice clear and resonant. I knocked on that door, and what I found on the other side was not just warmth or shelter. It was love, compassion, and a second chance. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. Nora Bennett taught me that one small act of kindness can create ripples that change the world. Today, I stand before you as proof of that truth. Ava's speech transitioned into a powerful call to action. She spoke of the need for systemic change, urging the audience to address the root causes of child exploitation and to invest in prevention and support systems. Her closing words left the audience in awe. Each of us has the power to open a door, to offer a hand, to change a life. Let us be the light that shines in the darkest of places. The crowd rose to its feet, their applause echoing through the hall. Ava stepped off the stage, her heart full, as she saw familiar faces in the audience, Nora, James, and Emma among them, their pride evident. After the conference, Ava and Nora shared a quiet moment in the hotel lounge. Ava handed Nora a program from the event, on which she had written a personal note. "For everything you've done," Ava said, her voice thick with emotion. "I hope you know how much you've changed the world." Nora read the note, her eyes glistening. "It wasn't just me, Ava. You've taken that light and made it shine brighter than I ever could have imagined." Back in Winter Haven, the foundation continued to thrive. Families came together to support its mission, and children who had once been lost found a place to call home. The community had become a model of compassion, inspiring other towns to follow suit. Ava worked tirelessly, expanding the foundation's reach. She partnered with international organizations, ensuring that the lessons learned in Winter Haven could benefit children worldwide. Years later, Nora passed away peacefully in her sleep, leaving behind a legacy that would endure for generations. At her funeral, held in the Bennett Center's main hall, Ava delivered a heartfelt eulogy. "She taught me to believe in miracles," Ava said, her voice breaking. "Not the kind that come from magic, but the kind we create through love, courage, and kindness." The service concluded with a choir of children singing Silent Night, their voices a testament to the hope Nora had given them. In the final scene, Ava sat at her desk in the Bennett Center, a framed photo of Nora beside her. She penned a letter to future volunteers, encouraging them to carry on the work. "If you're reading this, know that you have the power to make a difference," she wrote. "Open your heart, take that first step, and let the light in." As the camera panned out, the center buzzed with activity, children laughing, volunteers bustling, and the glow of the Christmas tree illuminating the space. The story closed with Nora's words echoing in Ava's mind. "One small act of kindness can light up the darkest of nights." As the story of Nora and Ava comes to an end, we're left with one powerful truth. Even the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever. What would you do if someone knocked on your door looking for hope? Would you have the courage to open it? Let us know in the comments below. What part of this story touched your heart the most? Was it Nora's unwavering bravery, Ava's incredible transformation, or the way one act of compassion sparked a movement? Your thoughts matter, and they might inspire someone else. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can share more stories of resilience, hope, and the power of human connection. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next journey. It could be the story that changes your life. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter.